Okay, so for decades,
Welcome to the deep dive.
the U.S. government
We sift through
line
the
was
research,
basically
the reports, the stories, and try to bring you the core
psychic
insights.
powers,
Today we're heading to rural
things
Japan,
far away with
1972.
Pure
for a story
fantasy.
that's
what
well,
they told
it's a
everyone.
bit of
Yeah, that was the
everything, local
public
legend,
face.
a really
Complete
baffling
skepticism.
encounter.
But
And
while that
definitely
was the
whispers
official
of something
story,
bigger.
behind
It really is
closed
a
doors,
fascinating one.
something
Picture this.
Well, something
Quiet
much
afternoon,
stranger
maybe
was
late
apparently
summer.
going on.
You've got the sounds
Deep
of insects,
inside the
maybe some
intelligence
distant
community.
bells. It's a really interesting contrast, isn't it? Publicly,
And
it's all
then,
scientific
bam,
dismissal.
5 schoolboys,
Privately,
a rice
the Pentagon,
paddy,
the
and
CIA,
something they just couldn't explain.
They're
Something
clearly
small,
wrestling
right?
with
Yeah.
something very
Like a
different.
hat.
These
Exactly.
fantasies
Small
suddenly
enough to
become
hold, apparently.
a
Metallic,
serious strategic
quiet,
issue.
Exactly.
and just
And that
completely
worry,
impossible
that
by
sort of
conventional
creeping fear
standards.
about psychic
behaved
warfare,
really
it leads to one of the
strangely, too.
Yeah, that's the
honestly
thing.
most
It wasn't just
bizarre
seen.
and top
They
secret
apparently
projects of the
photographed
whole
it,
Cold
chased
War.
it.
Projects on
One
street.
boy even
I mean, just
supposedly
picture
grabbed it for
a
an
second.
actual
And then it
government
vanished
project trying to
and
weaponize
reappeared.
the human
The accounts
mind.
there get a
Funded
little
off the
fuzzy,
books.
which just
Totally
adds
easy.
to it all. And
For a lot
officially,
of
the
people, this
cover story,
became
or maybe
like
the initial
Japan's
idea, was
Roswell, didn't it?
remote
Hints of
viewing.
secrets,
Right.
maybe
This
something extraordinary.
supposed
It did capture the
ability for
imagination
trained
that way. I
people to
think
just
partly because it involved that
perceive
interaction, you know,
distant
and the
places,
photos.
secret
That
enemy
set it
bases,
apart
maybe
from
even
just,
peek into the future.
lights in the sky.
All just
Right.
using
So
their minds. Our mission
And we
today
should be
in
clear,
this
this
deep
wasn't
dive is
some
to
like
trace that story.
side hobby.
We'll look at
It
the
wasn't
boys,
just a
the
few folks
witnesses,
messing around.
those really
This
crucial
was a
photos.
strategic move,
Examine
a
the
direct
official
response to what
response, or
they
maybe
thought
the
Soviets
lack
were
of
doing.
one.
They
and
were
dig into the
urgently
theories
trying
that
to
have
get an
sprung up,
edge
trying to
in
make
a
sense of it.
completely
And just
new
to pin it
kind
down,
of,
we're talking August 25th,
And that's what we're doing today. We're going to peel back those layers of
Kera,
secrecy.
which is near
really
Kuchi City on
deep dive
Shikoku
into
Island,
Project
Japan.
Sun Street.
Okay, let's get into it.
The
kind
where
of
does the
wild
story actually
conspiracy
begin?
theories
Well,
that are
it
still
seems to
swirling
start
around
pretty
it.
simply
Yeah, because
with
the story
a
goes
13-year-old
way
boy
beyond
named
just
Kyo
psychic
often
spying.
identified as
absolutely.
Michio Seo.
It might have
He's
cracked
just
open the
riding his
door
bike,
to,
you know, probably
alien
cutting through the
contact,
rice
maybe
fields like
even
kids do,
some
and he
sources
sees
suggest
this flash.
interdimensional conflict.
It gets
Dull
pretty out
silver,
there.
he
It
said.
really does.
Just
So
a
we're going to
few
look at
feet
where
over
it
the
came
water
from, the
in the
really
paddy,
unsettling
zipping
things
around
that
in these
viewers
weird
reported
little,
seeing,
almost
the
bat-like
weird
zigzags.
overlaps with old occult
Not a
stuff,
bird, not a bug.
and these incredible claims
Something
about
else.
contacting.
Definitely something else. He knew right away it
the
wasn't
unknown.
anything familiar.
So yeah,
So what did he
settle
do?
in. This is where
Just
things
stare
get
at it?
weird.
Or did
So
he get
where
others
Sun Street
involved?
even come from? I imagine seeing something like
It
that,
really
you'd
kicks
want someone
off
else
back
to
in
see
the
it
early
too.
70s.
Oh,
There was this
absolutely.
sort of
He didn't keep it to
quiet
himself.
panic
Called his
brewing
friends over.
in the
Pretty soon you've
intelligence
got
world
5
during the
kids
Cold
standing
War.
there. Right. Just
Word got out that the
mesmerized by this
Soviets
thing.
were pouring
And they all saw the
serious
same
money
thing.
and effort
That's
into
usually pretty
parapsychology.
important in these
And not
cases.
just dabbling.
It is,
We're talking
and looking back at their
state-sponsored
accounts,
experiments,
what's really striking
telepathy,
is how consistent
moving
they
objects
were.
with the mind,
They all
psychokinesis,
described
and
this
crucially,
shallow dome,
remote
a
viewing.
wide brim,
Yeah, and
like
when
a
U.S.
hat,
intelligence
slightly
picked up on
domed
this,
top.
they were
Alarms
absolutely
went off.
clear. Not a
Big
plane,
time.
not a
And the
kite, not
Pentagon
any toy they'd ever
especially.
You can
seen.
imagine the fear,
That
right?
agreement
What if this
is,
stuff is real? Even if it
pretty
only gives a
compelling.
small advantage.
5 kids,
Exactly.
same
The
description.
U.S. could be
Okay.
completely
But then there were photographs,
blindsided
right?
in a
Which
conflict
must have
that
just
doesn't
elevated the whole
use
thing.
bombs
Totally.
or spies in the
One of the
traditional
boys,
sense.
maybe
So
just
this
quicker
perceived
thinking
threat,
or braver,
this potential
I don't know,
psychic
managed
gap,
to snap
it leads
several
directly
photos.
to the
And you're
CIA
right,
starting
these
Project
pictures,
Stargate.
even though they're
Which was
grainy
kind of the umbrella
1970s
program. And
tech,
under Stargate, you get these
they became the
sub-projects.
absolute
Project
hinge
Sunstreak was
for
one
the
of
whole
them,
story.
run
They
by the
existed
Defense
that was
Intelligence
huge.
Agency, the
I
DIA,
can just picture
mostly
those
through the
photos circulating. What did they actually
1980s.
show?
So
you
Sun
make it out
Street
clearly?
gets
You could
going.
make out something.
And on
They show
paper,
this low, definitely
job
hat-shaped
sounds,
object hovering
well,
over the
almost
rice
straightforward
paddy
for
catching
that
sunlight.
world.
Copies
Recruit
got passed
people,
around town.
train them
Reporters
as
started
remote
showing
viewers.
Up. It resonated
Get them to
because
project
you
their
had the witness
consciousness,
consistency
basically,
and these
and
images,
spy on
imperfect
Soviet
as they were,
facilities,
that
gather
seemed to back it
intel.
all up.
Standard espionage.
It felt like
just
proof,
with a
I
very
guess,
unconventional
or at least strong
method.
evidence
But that's
that
not how
something
it played
genuinely
out, was
weird
it?
had
It
happened.
became
clear pretty
Exactly. It
fast
moved
this
it beyond
wasn't
just
just about
kids telling
finding
a
missile
story.
silos.
It gave it a
almost
kind of
right away, the viewers
tangible
weren't just
anchor.
describing,
even
you
if
know,
the photos
submarine
pens or
crystal
radar
clear.
installations,
so
the data
seeing
started
it,
getting
photographing it,
weird.
that's already
how?
pretty unusual.
Well, that was the big turning point.
But then the
really.
claims
The
get even
viewers
wilder,
started reporting
right? They
things
actually
that,
touched it.
based on our normal
This
understanding
is where
of
it
physics
goes
and
from
reality,
strange
just
sightings to
shouldn't
something else
exist.
Things that
entirely.
shouldn't exist.
They claimed
Okay,
they
now
got
we're getting
close enough
somewhere.
to actually
Yeah.
touch the brim.
The information they were bringing
Described
back
it
was
as
pushing
cool,
way past the
metallic,
boundaries of what anyone
smooth,
expected.
except for
It
maybe
fundamentally
single-handedly challenge
scene.
what the program was
One
even
boy
supposed to be
supposedly
doing.
even grabbed
So
at the
tell me
top
about these
part.
viewers. They weren't just
That's the
random
claim.
people off the street, right?
Some versions say
Many
he
had
held it
military
briefly.
background.
That's
before
right,
it slipped
often
away,
military
maybe
personnel.
tumbled into a ditch for a
And they
second.
went through
The
this
idea of
really
holding it, even
specific,
for a moment,
structured
that's
training.
what makes Kara stand out. Physical
Controlled
interaction.
protocols was
Wow.
the term. Like
Okay, so if
coordinate
they
remote
touched it
viewing
or grabbed
CRV.
it, CRV.
Did it
okay.
react?
So it wasn't
What
just
happened then?
like
It
closing your
definitely
eyes
seemed
and
to
hoping
react.
for the best.
The
No,
accounts
no,
very
very
systematic.
a bit here.
They might
as you
be given
expect,
just a set of
but the
geographic
core is
coordinates
consistent.
or maybe a
When it
random
was
number
handled,
linked
it
to a
supposedly
target.
let out this
Then they'd go
faint,
through these
high-pitched
stages,
sound,
sort of
kind of like an
drilling
insect
down,
swing,
describing sensory
and then it
details,
shimmered
sketching impressions,
and just vanished,
trying to
like
build a
dematerialized
picture
right there.
of a target they
Just
knew
like that.
nothing about consciously.
Well, some versions
Often
say it
something
zipped away
hidden
really
miles
fast
away, maybe
first, then
even
maybe
sealed
came
it back,
envelope
hovered over
right
a
there in the
nearby
room.
pond,
And did it
then
work
vanished
initially?
completely, heading
Well,
off
the
towards
early
the
results
hills.
were
Okay, so maybe not
apparently
instant dematerialization for
intriguing,
everyone,
impressive
but definitely
maybe,
a sudden
but small
departure.
scale.
Right.
You know,
The key
sketches that
takeaway
looked
for people who
surprisingly
believe
like
the
the
story is
Soviet
that the
factory,
object acted intelligently.
details about a
It
hidden
seemed to
bunker
evade
that
capture
later matched
almost
spy
mock their
photos.
attempts.
So
Enough
after
to
this
keep the
object
funding
disappears,
flowing, definitely.
what
so it
happens
had
on the
some
ground?
legs.
Yeah.
Did
But
the
then, like
police
you
get
said,
involved?
things took
Did
a
people
turn.
search?
A
Oh,
sharp
yeah.
turn.
Word
Yeah.
got
Because
around
it's one
fast.
thing to sketch
Local
a building
police were
you shouldn't
notified.
know
Lots
about.
of
It's
townsfolk
something
came
else
out
in
to search
search
the
fields,
fields,
when
trained
neighbors
military
gathered.
viewers.
Curiosity
start
must have
reporting
been huge.
experiences that just
But when officials did
flat
arrive
out
and look
defy the
around,
material
findings
world
were
as we know it.
minimal.
Really
what kind of thing?
sparse.
Like what?
Well,
What did they actually
get
find?
this. Some viewers
shallow
started
stuffs
reporting
in the mud,
energy
areas
beings.
where
What
the
energy
rice
beings?
stalks
Yeah.
were flattened
Not
down,
people,
maybe a
not
few
animals,
blades
just
of grass
conscious
that looked a
energy
bit
forms that were
scorched or
apparently
charred.
watching them
But
while they
no
were doing
pieces.
the remote viewing.
No
No
records.
viewers. Okay,
Nothing
that's
like
creepy.
that.
Right.
Nothing you'd
Others
expect
claimed they weren't
if,
just
say,
moving across
a drone
space, but
or
across time.
some experimental
Getting
gadget had
glimpses
crashed.
of ancient
Just these
history
very
or
subtle
even
traces.
future events.
And that
Time travel.
lack of obvious explainable debris.
There's one really famous
That sounds
or
like
infamous
fertile ground
account.
for cover-up
A viewer
theories.
insisted
Did
they
those
saw
start
the
right
Egyptian
away?
pyramids
Pretty
being
much.
built.
Especially
But not
when
by
some parents
Egyptians,
later claimed
by,
that after
quote,
certain
tall,
officials took
luminous
an interest,
entities.
the object
Luminous
itself was
entities
quietly
building
taken
the
away
pyramids.
and
I
never
mean,
seen
that
again.
sounds like something
unnamed
from a
officials.
fringe
Always a
documentary.
classified.
Isn't it just-
Exactly.
so you
Except
have these
these were
claims,
reports coming from
capture,
within
handling,
a classified
vanishing, and alleged
military official
intelligence
removal.
program.
For
That's
the
what makes
UFO
you stop and
community,
think.
that sequence
Yeah,
reads like
definitely.
a textbook.
Any other
cover-up.
examples
Oh,
for
yeah.
skeptics?
Another
For
one, just as
skeptics, it
strange.
sounds like
A viewer
rumor,
claimed
maybe
they found
embellishment
hidden
over time, kids
spacecraft
getting
under
excited,
the ice
adults
in Antarctica.
misinterpreting things, the familiar
Hidden
pattern.
spacecraft.
It's
Oh.
amazing
Like
how these
UFOs.
stories survive. Though.
It seems to be the
How did the
implication.
details, the interviews,
and
the photos
guarded
get preserved
apparently
over all
by
these
some kind of
years? It could
consciousness
easily
that
have just
resisted
faded away.
intrusion.
Yeah,
like
it's a
a
good
psychic
point.
guard dog.
Ironically, a
but
lot
not
of the
a dog.
preservation
Okay,
comes
wow.
down to
So these reports,
dedicated
were they just
independent
ignored,
researchers,
filed away as
UFO
crazy?
enthusiasts,
Well, officially, a lot of the
and
stuff
more
was
recently,
probably downplayed
people
or
doing
buried,
podcasts and
classified
documentaries. But
Shows
inside the
like
project, Astonishing Legends,
The
for
Whispers
example,
started.
they've done deep dives,
The idea
dug
took
up
hold
old
that maybe
Japanese
remote
press
viewing
reports,
wasn't just
tried
about
to piece
spying
together
on
the
Soviets
testimony.
anymore.
They've
Maybe
been crucial in keeping
maybe it was
the
about
Kera
making
story
contact.
accessible.
And this is where it gets
So
even
back to those
stranger,
photos.
right?
They're
The connection
essential,
or the
but they
apparent
sound
connection
like they could be
to
interpreted in completely
occult
different ways.
practices.
A real
Yes,
double-edged
that's
sword.
another layer to
Absolutely.
this whole thing
The
that's just
Kera photos
fascinating.
are almost a perfect
People
case
within the
study
program
in how we
apparently
interpret
started
ambiguous
noticing
images.
these disturbing
You see what you're
parallels
predisposed to see,
between the
maybe.
remote
So
viewing
for someone
techniques
who
they were
thinks it was
developing and
something
refining,
anomalous,
and practices
what do they
found
point to in those
really
pictures?
old occult
They'll emphasize the
traditions.
consistent
traditions,
shape,
like
like
a
a hat or dome shape,
methods
across
described in
different shots.
esoteric
They'll point to the
orders.
shadows,
Groups like
suggesting
the
it's a
Hermetic Order
solid
of the Golden
three-dimensional
Dawn
object,
or the
and the way it
Rosicrucians.
seems to just
Okay.
hang there.
They were looking
low
at
over the
rituals for
water.
astral
To
projection,
proponents,
achieving
it's
trance
clearly a
states,
structured
intense
craft of some kind.
visualization
Okay,
exercises.
but I can practically
the whole
hear the
idea of
counter-arguments.
separating your
What do
consciousness
skeptics
from
say
your
those
physical
photos
body.
really show? Wait, so the technique
Well, the
Sunstreak was
classic
teaching its
skeptical
military
take
viewers
is that it could easily
seem
be
to
something
directly
directly
mirror
mirror
these
these
ancient
ancient
mystical
an
practices.
ashtray,
It's quite
maybe
striking
part of
when
a
you put them
lamp,
side by side.
even a
So the
fishing
question
float.
becomes,
People
was
online
the
have done
Pentagon,
experiments
was the
showing how
DIA
ordinary objects
inadvertently
filmed with
stumbling
older
onto,
cameras at
or
the right
maybe
angle and the right
rediscovering
light
some
can
kind of
look pretty
ancient
mysterious.
technique? So maybe a
simple
mystics and
object,
secret societies
maybe even a
have been using
deliberate for
prank with a
centuries.
model.
That's the implication.
That's definitely on the
yeah.
table
Was
for
this
skeptics.
military
The possibility
intelligence
of a
program
hoax is
actually
always
an
there.
unwitting
here's the
or
tricky
maybe
part,
witting
isn't it?
occult experiment?
It's not just the photos in
Pretty
isolation.
scientific thought.
It's the
And it didn't
context.
stop there, did it?
Exactly.
You've got the multiple
experiences got
kids all
darker.
telling
They
basically
did.
the same
Some
story.
viewers started
The object
reporting
appearing and
encounters
disappearing
with
suddenly.
actively hostile
And those claims,
presences.
however
Hostile.
strange that they actually
How?
touched
They
it,
describe,
held it briefly.
entering
Right.
a
It
location
puts you in a bind.
mentally,
Either it's a
projecting their
hoax
consciousness
that was
there
incredibly
only
well
to be
executed and
confronted,
maintained by
not by
multiple
human
people
guards,
for
but by
decades.
what they
Or
described
it was
as
something real,
shadowy
behaving in ways that
entities,
just
things
don't
that
fit
seemed
our neat
fully aware of their
categories of how
psychic
things are
intrusion
supposed
and
to work.
actively tried
That's
to
the
block
core
them or
puzzle of
push them
Kera.
out.
Aware
And
of them.
frustratingly,
Yeah.
beyond those
psychic
debated
guards.
photos, the
Essentially,
hard
yes.
physical
Which
evidence,
raises a really
it's just
profound
No
and
metal
frankly
fragments analyzed in the
unsettling
lab that we know
possibility.
of.
Which is
No radiation
Well, if a human
human
readings.
mind
Nope.
can actually travel
None that have
outside
ever
the
been
body.
made public or
Maybe.
documented
Maybe those
reliably.
non-physical
Just those
realms
footprints,
aren't
the
empty.
flattened
Maybe
rice,
other intelligences
the
already live
flimsiest
there.
And maybe they
traces
don't
imaginable,
appreciate
really.
visitors.
So
Exactly.
you've got this
Entities
weird
that
event,
really
multiple
didn't
witnesses,
want people like the Sunstreak
photos.
viewers poking around. It makes
You'd
you wonder,
expect the authorities, maybe the
was
government,
Sunstreak
to
opening
jump on
doors
this,
that had
like
been
you said, Roswell
deliberately
style.
shut for
Was
a
that the
very
reaction
long
in
time?
Japan?
For a good
Not
reason?
really, no. It
Okay,
was
so
much
if they
more
were opening
subdued.
What we
doors,
see from the records is more like
what exactly did they find on the other side?
polite
Because
interest
some of the most
mixed with a
sensational
kind of
claims
procedural
are
standstill.
about,
Meaning,
well,
yeah,
aliens.
local police talk to the
Extraterrestrials.
kids.
Absolutely.
Village
This is where the
elders
story
probably
really
ask
goes
some
into high
questions.
gear. Maybe some
We actually have
municipal officials came by,
declassified documents,
but there wasn't any
fragments,
hints
big
really that
national
suggest
investigation
some
announced,
remote viewing
no
sessions were
panic,
specifically
no
targeting
official statement that
Mars.
this was
Mars.
something extraordinary.
Like the
Why do you
planet
think that
Mars.
was?
The
Japan
planet
in
Mars.
72.
There's one
Was it just
particularly
handled
famous
It could
session,
be
often
partly
cited,
cultural,
where a
partly
viewer gave this
bureaucratic.
incredibly
Japan
detailed
was
description.
modernizing rapidly.
They claimed,
but maybe
they
there
were
was a
observing
desire to
Mars
maintain
millions of
calm,
years ago,
especially in
millions.
rural areas.
And they described
avoid
seeing these tall
sensationalism,
beings
or
sheltering
maybe they just
inside
didn't know what to make
massive
of it.
pyramidal
That quiet
structures.
approach
Pyramids on
there.
Mars.
Pyramids on Mars,
almost
as their
invites
planet was
suspicion, doesn't
dying
it?
around
Were
them.
there actual
A civilization
complaints about
facing
how
extinction.
officials
Wow,
handled things?
okay.
Whispers
That's
of
quite a
pressure?
claim.
Oh, definitely.
It is, and it wasn't
Some
just
parents
Mars.
later talked about
Other
feeling
sessions
subtle
allegedly
pressure,
targeted
you know,
well-known
hints to take
UFO
kids home,
hotspots and
stop
crash
talking to
sites on
reporters,
Earth,
that sort of
including
thing as
Roswell,
well.
Of course,
the
Roswell had
fuss.
to be. And the idea that evidence
And viewers
might have been
reportedly
taken.
described
that
seeing
persists.
non-human
These
bodies,
inconsistent but
alien
recurring
artifacts
accounts
that
all
maybe
hidden away
some
deep
photos or
inside
even the
classified
object
government
itself
facilities.
ended up with people
So
just
not just
described
seeing
vaguely
things
as
far away,
official.
That
but
word again.
seeing things the
Official.
government was
So
actively hiding.
non-specific.
That's the claim.
Exactly. It suggests the
perfect
viewers
fuel
weren't
for
just passive
conspiracy
observers.
theories.
They were
What if
potentially
local
uncovering
police,
evidence
or
of
maybe
an
some
alien
higher up,
presence that was being
quietly
actively
confiscated
concealed.
the
And
object.
then there's Wright
Decided
Patterson
it
Air
was
Force
too
Base,
sensitive,
right?
too weird,
Always comes up
potentially
in these stories and
destructive.
just buried
Wright
it, made it
Patterson.
disappear.
That's
Another
the
chilling
narrative.
account
The government
involved a viewer
didn't
who
want
claimed
panic, or
they
didn't want other
psychically
countries knowing they
enter
had
a
something
hidden
potentially
chamber deep
advanced.
underground
So
there.
And what do they see?
make
Go away.
containers.
Holding
Plausible, I guess, if you lean that
biological
way.
specimens
What's
that
the
were
counter
completely
from
unlike
skeptics?
anything known
The
on Earth.
straightforward
Alien
counter
bodies,
is
basically.
that
Show me the
strong
proof.
implication.
There's
And
zero
another
documentary
viewer,
evidence,
possibly
no
targeting
memo,
the same
no internal
location or a
report,
similar
nothing
one,
confirming any
claimed
kind of
they
seizure.
witnessed some
It
kind
follows
of
the
psychic
classic
network.
pattern of cover-up
Something
rumors.
connecting
Right.
human
No
minds
paper trail.
to
But
something
you have to
else.
acknowledge
Something
for the people
beyond our
involved,
world, out
for the
among the
boys who
stars.
maybe
A
felt they
psychic
touched
network
something
connecting us
impossible.
to
That
aliens.
official
That was
silence.
the report.
It probably
So you look
felt
at all
like
these accounts
complicity.
together.
Like the
Mars,
authorities knew
Roswell,
more
Wright
but weren't
Patterson,
saying.
psychic
Okay,
networks.
so
It
when
paints
an
a
event
very
like
different picture
Kara
than
just
just spying on the
refuses to be
Soviets.
easily
Completely
explained,
different. If
we
you take
naturally
these
try to
reports at
categorize
face
it.
value,
What are the
even
main
just partially,
buckets people put
the
this incident
implication is
into?
huge.
The main types of theories.
Project Sunstreak
Generally, you can
might
group
have
the
started as
explanations
into about
espionage,
three
but it
families.
seems to have
There's the
pivoted.
mundane
It
explanation.
became about
the
preparing
deliberate
for
hoax
contact
theory,
with
and
non-human
then
intelligence.
or
the
maybe
other
more
categories.
cynically, something
About making
genuinely
sure that
anomalous.
contact
Let's start with
remained a
mundane.
secret,
What's the
kept
simplest,
far away
most
from the
down-to-earth
public eye.
explanation people
But the
offer?
theories don't
The
even
mundane
stop at
idea
just
is that
ETs
the
from other
object
planets,
was
do they?
just
Some people take it even
normal.
further.
Something
That's right.
terrestrial.
There's a
Maybe
whole other
weirdly
branch of
shaped
theory
toy
suggesting
someone lost,
Sunstreak
part
wasn't
of some
just
industrial
encountering
equipment
extraterrestrials,
like a cap,
but
or
reflector,
maybe even just
interdimensional
litter like an
beings.
ashtray
Interdimensional,
thrown
like
from a car.
from
And
parallel
the weird
universes
behavior.
or
The
different
zigzagging,
planes
the
of
vanishing.
existence.
Exactly.
That could be something
Explained
beyond
by,
just
say,
aliens in the
gusts
traditional
of wind
sci-fi
blowing
sense.
a light object
Viewers
around
reported
erratically,
experiences where they
optical
felt they'd
illusions
slipped
playing
out of our
tricks on the
reality
eyes,
altogether.
and maybe the
Slipped
power
out.
of suggestion
Into
among a
landscapes
group
they
of
described
excited
as
kids.
utterly
Memory
alien,
research shows that
surreal,
shared false memories
populated
can form
by
pretty
forms
quickly
of
in
consciousness
So,
that just
plausible,
didn't fit into
simple.
any human category.
Occam's
Not
razor's
just beings
simplest
from other
explanation
stars,
is
but maybe
often
from
best.
other
Exactly.
dimensions.
It requires
Can
the
you give an
fewest
example? What
assumptions.
kind of things
Okay,
do
what
they
about
describe?
theory number 2?
The reports are really
A
strange.
deliberate hoax.
One
Someone
describes
made
seeing
this
this
happen.
massive,
That's the idea that it was all
complex geometric
staged.
structure.
Maybe the
that
boys
seemed to
themselves
exist,
cooked
quote,
it up as a prank
in
that got
between
way
worlds,
bigger than they expected.
like a hub
or
or
maybe
a
someone else
gateway
planted the
connecting
object
different
to cause a
realities.
stir.
And dimensional. What are the problems with
Others
the hoax
described
theory?
the entities
Well, a big one is that
themselves,
usually,
sometimes insectoid,
eventually,
sometimes almost
someone
machine-like,
talks.
sometimes
A successful
completely
hoaxer
formless,
often wants
just
credit,
presences,
or the secret slips
and they
out.
communicated
But
not with
here,
language, but
no
maybe
one ever
through
came
direct
forward
telepathy
saying,
or
"Yeah,
what
that was me.
viewers
I
felt
fooled
as
everyone."
Waves of emotion.
Plus,
Not talking,
staging that
just
alleged physical
or
interaction,
pure thought transfer.
the grabbing, the object
And
reacting.
these
that would be
beings,
really
they
hard
often
to pull
felt
off convincingly
incredibly
in the
ancient,
moment,
like they'd been around
especially
for
with
millennia,
multiple
watching
witnesses right
Earth,
there.
watching
Seems like it would
humanity.
fall apart.
Some
Right.
seemed
Harder to
indifferent,
fake
others
than
felt
just seeing something weird at a
hostile,
distance.
even predatory.
Much harder.
So,
Predatory,
if
interdimensional
mundane
beings,
seems too
that's
simple
pretty
for
terrifying.
some,
It puts
and
a whole new
hoax seems
spin on the
unlikely to
idea of
others,
contact, doesn't it?
that
It's not
leaves us
just
with the
meeting
other
neighbors from
category.
another star
This is where things
system.
get really
It's
interesting, right?
potentially
This is
bumping
definitely
into
the
intelligences
most
from entirely different
intoxicating
layers of
theory for
reality
many,
that might
that
operate
it
by
was
completely different
genuinely
roles.
a
So the conspiracy
non-terrestrial
theory here
object.
is that Sunstreak
Craft
found
with
this.
technology
Essentially,
beyond what we
yes.
had, or maybe even
That the
have
project
now.
moved
What points to
beyond
that? The
just
witness
psychic
descriptions?
spying, or even
Primarily,
simple
yes.
alien contact.
The descriptions of its agility,
became
its
an attempt to
acceleration
actually
faster
map
than any
this
normal
interdimensional
object should move.
landscape.
That
To
faint
figure out
hum
what
or
other
tone
kinds of
some reported
intelligence
hearing,
share our
the
reality,
feel of the metal
or
being
exists just
somehow
outside our perception.
And the reason it
So
all got
you
shut
accept their
down or
testimony.
buried.
According to
What
the
could it have
theory,
been?
speculation
because the
runs
findings
wild
were
here.
just too disturbing.
Was it an
too
unmanned
destabilizing?
probe?
Like a
Discovering that
drone
we
from
share our
somewhere else
existence
scouting?
with
Was it experimental
potentially
tech from another
powerful,
country, maybe
ancient, and
disguised?
sometimes hostile
Or the big one.
interdimensional
Was it
entities?
something not from Earth
That's
at all?
not something
And
you
for
just release
believers
at a
in
press
that
conference.
other
It gets locked
category,
down
what makes
deep.
Kera special
Okay, so
compared
let's talk
to
about
other
UFO
UFO
sightings.
I think it
Officially,
really comes
Project
down to that
Sunstreak was
claimed
terminated
human
in the early
contact, the
1990s.
closeness,
That's
the
the official
photos,
story,
and especially
yes.
that
And the
alleged
reason
brief
given was
physical
pre-planned,
interaction.
right? Something
It
like
connects Kera to other reports
inconsistent
globally of
results
these
and
small,
budget cuts.
elusive UFOs
Pretty much
that
standard
seem to interact
bureaucratic
briefly,
language for pulling
tease
the plug on
capture,
something, then
happens all the
vanish.
time with
If
government
it's a pattern
projects.
that
But given
believers see
everything
in the
we've just
wider
talked about, a lot of
phenomenon,
people don't buy
Kera
that, do
becomes
they?
a prime example of that close encounter.
From a
type.
critical
It's also a story that's
perspective,
now over 50
many
years old.
skeptics, or maybe
How does the
believers in
passage
the
of
more
time
exotic
and human
aspects,
memory
argue that the
play into
official
understanding
termination was
Kera
just
today?
Oh, massively. Memory is a tricky thing, isn't
To
it?
do what?
Over
Hide the
decades, stories
failures.
get retold,
Or hide the
details can
successes.
shift,
To hide the successes,
embellishments
or at
might
least
creep
the
in
nature of the
consciously or
findings.
unconsciously.
The belief is that the project
emotional
didn't really
impact
end.
colors
It just
the
went
recollection.
deeper
The
underground.
boys
Into
grew
black
up.
budget programs.
Some apparently
Even
spoke
more
later about the
Exactly.
fear or even
Broken
shame
up,
associated
maybe
with the
renamed,
event, maybe
absorbed
pressure
into
they
other
felt.
classified
Others seem to have
initiatives where
embraced
it
it,
could
seeing
continue
it as
without
this defining
any public
moment when the
oversight,
ordinary
without awkward
world was
questions,
touched by
which
something
leads to the big
extraordinary.
question:
Definitely
why?
left a mark on their lives.
Why the
So
alleged
memories
cover-up?
can be
And the
unreliable.
answer, according
but
to
does
these
the
theories,
core
is pretty
story hold
fundamental,
up
isn't
when
it?
researchers
It's
look
reality
back?
shattering,
Did
potentially.
the main
If
facts
human
stay
minds
consistent
can
over
genuinely
time?
do these
That's
things,
what's interesting.
access
Oral
information
historians and
across
researchers
space and
who've
time,
revisited the
make
case
contact
often
with
find that the
non-human
core
intelligences,
elements,
glimpse
hat-shaped
ancient
objects
secrets,
or August
future events,
1972, the
rice
implications
paddy,
are just
multiple young
enormous.
witnesses,
World
photographs
changing.
taken, those things
Too much
remain
power for
remarkably
the
stable
public to
across
handle.
different
Or
accounts at
too much
different
power
times.
for anyone but a
fuzzy.
select few
Exactly.
to handle.
Yeah.
The
That's
peripheral
the
details,
argument.
the
That
exact
kind of
sequence
capability,
of the
that kind of knowledge
precisely
couldn't be
how
allowed
long
out. It
someone
had to be
held it,
controlled,
the
contained
specific
kept
actions
secret
of officials.
by those
That's
who
where you see
understood
more
its
variation
potential.
and blurring.
Or
Memory
its
fills in
danger.
gaps.
And
maybe
some former
smooths out
viewers, people who are actually
inconsistencies.
in these
It's also
programs,
fascinating how Kera
they
keeps
claim it's
getting
still going
rediscovered,
on, right?
There are claims
By
like that, yes.
podcasters like us,
Former remote viewers who
documentary makers
insist
on
the
YouTube,
government still
amateur
runs
investigators.
psychic
Yeah, the
programs.
digital age has given
But
it a
maybe
whole
not
new
just
life,
for
which
spying
are both good and
anymore.
bad.
What for them?
Probably.
For communication.
Well, the good part is access.
Specifically,
Old
communication
interviews that
with
were
some of
buried in
these
archives can
entities.
surface online.
Beings
Photos
get
that,
digitized
according
and
to these
analyzed
claims,
in new
might be
ways.
influencing
Decades
or
of
even
rumors can be
shaping
cross-referenced
human
with
destiny
actual
in ways we
local
can't even
reporting
begin
from
to
the
grasp.
time. The
Shaping
raw
our
material is
destiny.
more
Okay,
available
now we're
than
in some
ever.
really
And the
deep
downside.
conspiracy
The internet
territory.
loves
We are.
patterns.
The theories branch
sometimes
out
too
even
much.
further from here.
Once a
Some
particular
suggest
theory
Sunstreak
about
didn't
Kera
just
gets
find
popular
aliens,
online,
it found evidence of
confirmation
alien
bias kicks
control.
in,
Control.
And evidence gets
Like,
selectively amplified.
We're being managed.
Like
Video
reports of
documentaries
a
might
cosmic
edit for maximum
overseer or a
drama, losing some
non-human
nuance.
council
It's easier to
debating
spread
humanity's
misinformation
fate, or even
alongside
viewing
the
us
good
almost like
information.
livestock.
Still, these
Really disturbing
reinvestigations
stuff.
help confirm
And
the
then there's
basics,
the other
don't they?
angle,
Like, the boys
that
definitely
Sunstreak
existed.
wasn't just
Photos were
military
definitely
tech,
taken.
but was
Multiple
essentially
witnesses
a
told similar
modern
stories right from the
government-funded
start.
occult
Absolutely.
experiment.
Those foundational
Tapping into the
claims are
same
pretty
kind of
solid.
ancient knowledge
It's the
that
more
groups like the
slippery
Freemasons
questions
or
that
the
remain
Knights Templar
frustratingly out of
supposedly
reach.
possessed.
What
And
exactly happened to
esoteric
the
science
object after it
rediscovered.
disappeared? Did
So,
any official
military
agency
intelligence
truly
meets secret
confiscate and study
societies
it? We just
meets
don't have
ancient
definitive
magic.
answers.
That's one of the more
So
elaborate
ultimately,
theories,
the
yes.
Kera object
And the idea
story
is that these techniques
endures
might still be in
precisely
use today,
because it
maybe
doesn't
by
have
elite
that
groups.
neat,
And some
tidy
even
ending.
connect the
I
dots
think
to
that's
the
exactly
recent
right.
surge
It was
in
this
official
very local
UFO
event,
interest,
just
the
5
UAP
kids in a
reports.
field.
How sad.
But it has
The theory
this
goes
global
that maybe the
resonance because
remote
it
viewers
touches on
just
those big
saw too
questions.
much.
It has
Maybe
all
the truth
perfect
started leaking
ingredients
out in
for a
ways that
lasting
couldn't be
mystery.
controlled by
Credible
conventional
witnesses,
secrecy
seemingly
anymore,
bonded by the
forcing the
experience.
government's hand to start
Visual reports
acknowledging
the photos
something
that
is
show
out there.
something,
Wow.
but not quite
It all
enough.
comes
And
back
those
to the
gaps
mind,
in the
doesn't
official
It
story,
really
the
does.
silence,
Whatever
that
the
just fuels
truth of Project
speculation.
Sunstreak,
So you're left
it
wondering,
highlights that
maybe
Okay,
it
so
really
for
was just a
decades,
prank that
right,
spiraled out
the
of
US
control
government
and took
line
on a
was
life of its own.
basically
Maybe it was some kind of experimental tech
supernatural stuff,
disguised to look
psychic
innocuous.
powers, telepathy,
Or maybe,
seeing
and this
things
is the
far away with
possibility
your
that
mind,
keeps the story alive,
pure
that
fantasy.
thrill,
That's what
and
they
maybe
told
even a little
everyone.
Yeah,
fear.
that was the
Maybe
public
it really
face.
was
Complete
something not of our
skepticism.
making.
A
But,
little visitor.
You know, while that was
a
the official
hat-shaped
story,
scout ship
behind closed
that
doors,
came,
something,
looked around,
well,
and then
something
just
much stranger
left,
was apparently going
as
on.
if it had never
Deep
been.
inside
left
the
behind
end
of the
intelligence
photos, the
community.
memories, maybe
It's
the
a really
faint
interesting
imprint on that
contrast,
rice
isn't
paddy
it?
near Coochie.
Publicly, it's all scientific
And a community
dismissal.
that, for a little
Privately,
while, held
the
this
Pentagon,
really
the
strange
CIA,
and compelling secret.
they're clearly
It makes you
wrestling with
think.
something very different.
If you were walking
These
near there
fantasies
today,
suddenly
looked over
become
that field, maybe you'd feel
a
just a
serious
hint of what those
strategic
boys
issue.
felt.
Exactly.
That sense of wonder,
And that
maybe
worry,
unease,
that sort of
feeling
creeping
that the
fear about
ordinary world
psychic
got
warfare,
punctured
it leads to
just
one
for
of
an
the
afternoon by
honestly
something
most
utterly
bizarre and
extraordinary.
top secret
And
projects
it really
of the
makes you
whole Cold
ponder
War,
how
Project
we
Sunstreak.
as societies
I mean,
deal
just
with the
picture it.
uncanny,
An
doesn't it?
actual
How we
government
choose
project
what to
trying to
believe
weaponize the
when
human
faced
mind,
with something
funded
that
off the
seems
books,
impossible.
totally